Good morning. Thanks for bearing with me with technology issues. I've been doing this for the whole COVID region. You think that I would have no problems ever, but we're humans, right? Welcome to the second of three presentations centered around effective practices for working with high crisis employees. These trainings that you are attending are offered in partnership with Elevate Rapid City, the Children's Home Society of the Black Hills, the Career Learning Center of the Black Hills, and my practice, Palecek Therapy and Consulting. If you missed a training or would like to go back and review these trainings, you can find these previous webinars on Elevate Rapid City's YouTube channel. And my name is Tracy Palecek. I have been in human services and mental health for over, 20 years. Born and raised in South Dakota, I'm a trauma-trained licensed professional counselor and an advocate for those who are struggling in the crisis of poverty. I also have a passion for changing and creating systems in which we all can thrive, both those who are benefiting from those systems and those who are working in those systems, including our workforce, our businesses, our agencies. I believe in using the latest research-based methods to help people achieve better outcomes across the board. So we're very excited to be here today. Our presentation today is going to be around designing interventions around the science of behaviors. This is a continuation. And just a reminder for those of you who joined us last time, this series of presentations are meant to be a taste of what we are offering in partnership in the spring and or summer. We are planning a dynamic conference. We are hoping, fingers crossed, with COVID, we don't know for sure, but we are hoping that we will be able to be in person to offer this in-depth training to businesses and agencies. Because we have some dynamic things planned, we want you to be able to come and bring your team and be in a group of experts and be presented with the latest research-based practices for increasing employee outcomes among those who we define as high crisis. And we want you to be able to then have time to create policies and procedures or ideas right then and there with the help of experts right there, and take those out when you leave that conference or that workshop that day. You'll be able to go and put those in practice in your agency or your business. So that's what we're looking for. Look for that information about that larger training on Elevate's page. Elevate will be updating you. So if you haven't signed up for notices, please do so. With me here today, joining me is an amazing colleague of mine, Tifanie Petro. She's the Director of Advocacy and Prevention, and she oversees the Children's Home Child Advocacy Center, multiple statewide awareness and education campaigns. She also happens to be an Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs, Master Trainer and Fellow. And again, as I've said before, she's just an amazing rock star in this field. The work that she does is dynamic, and I love that they're focusing now on ACEs in the workforce. So this was an amazing natural partnership. Today, we're going to delve into designing interventions around the science of behavior. Tifanie is going to continue to lead us through the science of ACEs and factors that can influence worker performance. And I will continue with leadership and management practices that are proven to increase those employee outcomes. Before we get totally started, I want to remind you guys about the definition of what high crisis employee means. This is a difficult term. It really means that if you're employing folks who, due to circumstances like COVID or a divorce or something like that, are in a position to where their lives are, and their lives are just unstable. They've got instability in things like childcare, transportation, housing, sometimes food. Very often we employ a lot of entry-level workers. You're going to be dealing with this group. They are working towards stability, but due to systemic factors and other things, it's very difficult for them to adhere to some of our inflexible routines, our outdated management and non-innovative practices in the workforce. So we want to help them succeed. And that's why these interventions are designed around those folks who are temporarily experiencing high crisis living. Okay, so if that makes sense. At the end of the day today, at the end of this training today, Tifanie and I will both be available to ask questions through the chat. We also will have our contact info at the end of this presentation. If you are interested in not waiting until the spring, both Tifanie and I present on a number of topics around leadership development, around empathy, around service delivery, around outcome-based practices. So you can contact us and discuss that if that's something you're looking for. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tifanie to kick us off.
All right, Tracy, thanks for that warm introduction, and let's just dive right into it. So last time that we were together, and I see some new faces and some familiar faces, so I'm always faces. So I'm always really excited for that. And I talked a little bit about the suitcase that we carry around with us and how it is filled with both good and negative or not so good experiences. But those are our lived experiences that make up who we are. And I talked a little bit about how we pack our suitcase, right? And how we practice that self-care. So I'm a leader in what I do, and I have a staff and a team that I run and I work with, and I'm fortunate enough to do that. And I don't know about you in the workplace, but sometimes it's the why question that drives me crazy. Why am I having to have this conversation again? Why can't you just learn, or why, right? Those are kind of natural gut responses. So we want to start shifting from why to what happened. How did we get here? And so when we talk about the science of behavior, we're really looking at lived experience or adverse childhood experiences or trauma. There's a lot of ways that we could define it that happens in those first formative 18 years of life, and how it actually changes the way that our brain works. But it doesn't stop when we're 18. Lived experiences, pandemics, maybe losing a job or having to let someone go, or the stress of a new project, all of those things continue to impact us. We're going to talk about how that really resonates with us on a cellular level. So we carry around these issues in our tissues. Now, if I asked you to think of a song that takes you back to a high school memory or your first kiss, I bet you could think of that. Or a smell that takes you to grandma's or auntie's kitchen. And those are positive memories. And they're memories that live kind of in us. We don't think about them or don't always recall them until maybe we go to take a drink of our coffee and we're transported back to that first date where we met our significant other. But we're also carrying around memories for things that maybe are difficult, like anniversaries of a loss or a death or losing a job or a car accident. And we don't necessarily remember those things until we're driving down the street and we see the corner, or we see the place where we've got our first heartbreak, right? And so when we think about issues in our tissues, sometimes those things are just called up in us. And what that means in your workplace and your interactions is you have to be mindful about what maybe triggers you or activates you, is another way that you could say that. Do figures of authority send you into a place where you don't feel safe? Do titles, bosses and CEOs, does the perceived sense of authority cause some uncomfortability for you? You need to be mindful about what you're bringing to that situation, but also staying curious about what that worker is. Are they more responsive when you speak to them one-on-one versus in a group setting? Does tone of voice matter? I think Tracy talked about that a little bit last week, about how just our environment can create a more receptive space for those that we work with. Go ahead. And this all starts from the first spark of life. So babies are born knowing how to eat, sleep, breathe, poop, right? All the basics. But we're born with all the brain cells that we're ever going to need. They're just not hardwired together. The first 5 years of life, 90% of brain development happens. That's what's estimated, right? And so how do children learn? They learn through interaction, through connection, through having their needs met. But children are egocentric, which means that they don't know that when they cry and mom gets mad, that it's not about that. Maybe she's just had a bad day at work. Or when they act out and mom doesn't come, they don't know that that's not anything to do with them, and she might be struggling with postpartum depression. Children start to hardwire to survive in the environments in which they're living. And so they start to form these synaptic neurons, these little pathways in your brain. So by the time that kids reach school age, their synaptic neurons are firing all over the place. They're supposed to be learning about science, math, and language, about response, relationships. Sometimes, though, our kids are in environments where they're learning how to survive. Where does my next meal come from? How do I keep the cops from coming? What am I going to have to do so that dad doesn't come into my room and hit me? We hardwire those traits of survival, right? When we think about where are our emotional, psychological, mental safety needs being met. So if you remember from last week, or if you watched the recording, you heard me talk about how safety looks really different in a lot of different environments. So by the time kids reach high school, so the age of 14, they start a pruning process, or a use it or lose it. So kids are going into high school, and if they didn't learn that eye contact and respectful manners gets me further than a kick in the shin, they don't necessarily hardwire that connection. And I wish this slide had one more slot on it that said adulthood. I don't know about you, but I magically didn't get smarter when I turned 18. I'm not sure that I'm super smart now, right? What we know about how the brain works is that we don't magically reform those synaptic neurons that teach us about relationship and respect and processing and words have power. We don't magically get those just because we're an adult, but as a society, as a workplace, we're often calling up the question of, you should know better. You're an adult now. Now, as we're moving through this, why this is important is let's look at how the brain develops. So the brain develops in a chronological fashion, right? And so the first part of this brain that develops is your reptilian or survival brain. Remember, I talked about having your needs met. The next part of your brain that develops is your limbic system. This is the am I good enough? Am I worthy? My fight, flight, or freeze is stored in that space, right next to my memories, right? Issues in our tissues. And so when we're looking at how lived experience plays out in the workplace, we have to understand that the prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain that says 5 minutes from now is shooting this email or this text off to my boss, is that a good idea? That doesn't fully develop until we're 25. But when we're stressed or we're in fear, that's the first part of your brain that goes offline. Your Wi-Fi, your computer, your internet has been disconnected. That means I'm not thinking about 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 years from now. Do I need this job? Am I going to be able to pay my bills next month? I'm thinking, how do I survive in this space? And so individuals who have grown up in a toxic or chaotic, stressful environment tend to have overactive amygdalas, which means they're worried that fear is around the corner, which means that they're more easily activated. So what's the big deal, right? People should just get over it. Sometimes that's the idea that we might have, but I want to challenge you to look at where we're going on this journey. We know that adverse childhood experience or lived experiences are predispositioning or having a risk of mental health, social problems, physical ailments, and that's going to directly impact your workforce. And it's going to show up in ways like how they handle stressful environments on the job, their ability to maintain or be financially stable, or do they even show up to work in the first place? So it might be easy to go, well, you had a tough childhood and your brain works different. So, but what's it matter to me as your employer? It means that we have to understand that how we create an environment for our employees can actually improve the return on our investment. It can actually improve the likelihood for productivity and for even for that worker to show up. So when we think about behavior in the workplace, go ahead, Tracy. We know that emotional dysregulation might show up in a couple different ways. And this certainly, Tracy is an expert on emotional dysregulation and certainly walks people through this journey. But remember last week how I said that we can't always tell our employees to just leave it at the door. That's kind of an old philosophy of how we do business. When we are working with employers, when we talk about meeting employees where they're at, it's a holistic approach. It's an invitation to understanding their journey and remember, how did I get here? What happened? But you might have workers that are maybe struggling with their significant others, struggling to connect or find connection in the workplace. They may be making impulsive behaviors or have trouble making decisions in high stressful environments, or even just problem solving. And the reason this happens is because of something called a window of tolerance. So remember how we talked about the amygdala, and too much chaos or toxic stress will actually decrease a person's window of tolerance, which means they may be more likely to be pushed into being activated or upset or aggressive or impulsive, or they may become more despondent or shut down or trying to numb or void out feelings or just detaching from the environment altogether. And this happens because when we create a system where somebody feels unsafe, or when somebody just feels unsafe, regardless of what we're doing, their fight, flight, or freeze gets activated. And depending on their fear-based response, they may flip on or become activated or completely shut off and withdraw from that situation. When we talk about a holistic or trauma-informed workplace, we're inviting a conversation that creates a space to open that window of tolerance up for your employees. It allows them to show up to work in a meaningful and whole way, knowing that they're going to get very specific responses from their employers, is consistency and engagement and concern and caring. And when you're out of that window of tolerance, that's where you can start to see behavior issues in the workplace. You can start to see them maybe not wanting to come or not wanting to participate. And so Tracy's going to talk about a way that you can create that space in her section. But ultimately, when we look at ACEs in the workplace, we know that this was a particular study, and we looked at how does it really, or the researchers, excuse me, I didn't do it, look at how this really shows up. Now, when you're trying to manage your staff, when you're scheduling, when maybe you've got a 24-hour response like Children's Home does, 2 or more days a month can really create a lot of burden and fatigue and burnout for your other staff. And so when you think about creating an environment, it does matter when people call out, not just for that shift, but then for every other employee that has to cover that space. And we know that everybody should be paid $1 million to do what they do, right? But that employees that have lived experience and do not have the support that they need will often struggle to, in the space of living paycheck to paycheck, maybe they have to have 2 or 3 jobs just to accommodate a cost of living. And sometimes that is because of choices, and sometimes that's because of the economy. But understanding that the higher their ACE score, the more at risk they are of facing these adversities. And these adversities are going to play out in your workspace. And then sometimes just not even, they're showing up, but they might not be performing to the level that, or the expectations that you set. When you invite this conversation and when you start to look holistically at your employees, you can create a space in which, again, they can show up and you can start to fine tune what it is about what's happening for them that's distracting them, or, maybe they're on their phone more than they're on the laptop doing the work. And so understanding the why behind the behavior helps us to make a plan of progress moving forward that's beneficial for not only the employee, but also you as the employer.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was amazing. I think that what we really want to hit home is that high crisis employees tend to be, if they're experiencing instability due to issues of poverty, that could be a chronic trauma. That could be something that is living and trying to live in an environment where you are scrambling for resources, where you are moving from crisis to crisis to crisis. You're trying to put out fires here and trying to put out fires there. That impacts how you work, it impacts how you parent, it impacts everything because your environment is so crisis oriented. And what Tiffany said is so true. Where do you see this? In what we categorize high crisis employees, if it's due to issues of poverty or lack of resources, we call them the working poor. These are clients who tend to have 2 or 3 part-time jobs, typically entry-level, fast food, domestic help, sometimes tourism, all the things that we have around here in our area. They typically do okay for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the month, and that last 2 weeks of the month, 1 or 2 weeks, if any kind of crisis happens, if a car repair comes up, if a childcare emergency comes up, they simply do not have the backup to solve those problems in an efficient way, which then impacts their ability to show up for work and everything else. So when Tiffany is trying to talk about the mindfulness, this window of arousal, dysregulation that's happening, where are you seeing this, employers? You're seeing this in your no call, no shows. You're seeing this in people getting really upset at something that might seem small, dealing with a customer and blowing up and saying, I quit. That is actually very typical of the crisis brain, or somebody who is just wired to survive in a crisis environment. And so the point we're making here in these presentations and in our larger deep dive is, if we as employers, as managers, can look at what research tells us, if we can keep people employed, if we can change a bit of how our systems work to meet them where they're at, to anticipate some of these things and to prepare for them, then what do? We actually help create them the stability that they're working toward. By them remaining employed, they actually get to provide a more stable environment for their kiddos, which then they grow up to have higher levels of education. Our community has lower calls for service, both for law enforcement, for domestic violence. And that translates into a stable community for all of us to benefit from. So this is more than just your business. It's actually about communities. And in my next slide here, what I want to revisit was something I talked about last time. This is this mindset shift that Tiffany referred to, that if we as employers say, well, I've got these rules, and if they can't follow the rules, they're out. That's fine, and you can operate that way. But one, does it save you money? We mentioned last time that in entry and tourism level positions, it costs employers on average $6,000 per year per employee for those who no call, no show, who quit, who walk out, any issues related to turnover. That is very expensive for your business. It is much more practical to say, I have a plan when there's emotional dysregulation in my workplace. It's much more proactive to say, I'm going to change my mindset around this. The other thing that I'm interested in as a mental health professional and as an advocate is, I want you to work with purpose and joy. If you own a fast food place, you should do that and go in there and cannot wait to get to work and do that. And it is possible, but you do have to shift your mind. And how do we do that? Well, you can come and see me for therapy. I have a high number of people who come in for therapy related to job stress. It's managing people, it's managing situations, it's owning a business. It's very stressful. The first thing we do is talk about, are your goals realistic? And when you talk about proactive versus reactive leadership, here are the 2 styles that we see in today's business. A reactive leader, for example, or owner or operator of an agency or business, is easily offended. Every single time something happens or a crisis comes up, they're angry about it. They're upset that this is not running perfectly. They tend to blame others. They tend to look at a micro level. For example, if you have a no call, no show, it's Joe's fault. Joe's a jerk. Joe is doing something to me. Joe is injuring my business. Joe is costing me money. instead of what Tifanie talked about why. What is it about this system that is making it impossible for Joe to come to work? Now, Joe might be a jerk. I'm not saying he isn't, okay? But Joe also might be somebody that I've hired knowing that the pool of employees that I have to choose from with their skill level at this time, and it's temporary while they're working towards stability, that they don't have the resources that I have in the middle class. I right now can count on my hand 5 people who I could call to give me money if I needed it, childcare, a ride, because that's the hidden stability of the middle class. We have to understand and know if we're hiring from a certain pool of people, we have to understand their world and how hard it is for them to navigate, understanding they don't have a safety net. If Joe's car breaks down, most often, if he is struggling in the crisis of poverty, everybody that he knows and loves is also struggling in the crisis of poverty. So the likelihood that he can just call 5 people and have that handled is very low. So why don't we be proactive about that and think about that in our policies and procedures? A reactive leader will say things in anger and often regrets them later. They vent excessively and complain in front of their employees. And if you focus on it, it will come to you. If you are always scanning the environment looking for terrible things, well, you're going to find them. Let me tell you, you will find them. A reactive leader changes only when forced to. Only when crisis occurs did they quickly look at what they need to do, and they typically make a short-term solution rather than constantly looking at the bigger picture and saying, how can I design the system better so that I feel better about service delivery and being a mentor and being a leader? And how can I design the system better so that the people I'm hiring can succeed here? So that takes us into that proactive attitude. It really comes down to your mind shift. You need to commit to a calm attitude and calm communication. One thing that the crisis brain responds to and actually heals as they're moving towards stability is that what I call the safety signal. If I say I'm going to do something and I always do it, my employees know that that's a safety signal. I can consistently count on this person. They are calm, they are caring, they are professional. When they have a discussion with me, it is in private. They do not assume that I am the problem. They ask me what I'm going through, and they do it on a regular and consistent basis when things are not in crisis, right? That's what proactive means. It means having things in place that create an area of calm, of safety, of consistency, and of planning ahead, and a true understanding of how I'm going to solve problems when they arise. Number one thing I teach my clients, of course, mentality, right? Instead of, I can't believe Joe didn't show up. I can't believe I've had so many no calls, no shows. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. You need to start saying, of course, I'm going to have no call, no shows. Of course, I'm going to need this shift covered and I'm short staffed. Of course, because if we start to say that these crises regularly occur in these businesses for these reasons, we're not upset by them. We don't react freshly in anger every time something happens that has been happening for years. We actually notice those patterns of that happening, and we get excited to think of how can I creatively and innovatively plan for this? What's my backup plan for a no call, no show? If your backup plan is to get mad, swear, yell and complain at everybody, then call around frantically to try to get it covered, and then get mad and go in and be angry when you have to cover it, does that feel great? That sounds terrible. I've worked in restaurants before, and I'm using them as an example. It sounds like a terrible way to operate. Businesses like that, where there is shift work and you're employing these entry-level clients or employees, are some of the most stressful places to run and own. So have that, of course, mentality. A proactive leader takes responsibility for those choices. I decided to run this business. I can decide if I want to do it being stressed out or if I want to do it with an attitude of care and stability and concern. And I want to go to work being happy, or I want to go to work being stressed. Those are things that you can work on as a leader. You focus on problem solving, not problem finding. You want to say, hey, I'm noticing that I'm having a lot of people not being able to work this 5 to 10 shift. Now that's my busiest time. And so I need people there to work it. So what am I going to do to solve this? You're going to reach out to your clients through those channels we mentioned last time, or to your employees who, by the way, high crisis brains have amazing gifts. And one of them they are resourceful like nobody's business. They will give you ideas because they spend their day solving problems and crises, right? So go to them and say, guys, I need people here consistently, 5 to 10, and I know it's a difficult time. First, understanding why might it be a difficult time for these clients to come in 5 to 10? Because it's difficult to get childcare 5 to 10. It's difficult if you're a single parent. It's difficult to work evenings. So, what do your employees say? They might say, I can come in from 5 to 7. They might split the shift. They might say, hey, I can watch your kiddos if you can come and cover this. Let creativity happen. Again, proactive leadership. Sorry, I could go on and on. I know I've got to get to another slide here. And again, you're going to be proactively searching for these patterns with your of course mentality, and you're going to change these systems to meet them, and you're going to maintain these systems, and you're going to be constantly innovating. And one of the tools you're going to do that is individual and group check-ins. Now, this replaces your boring 2-hour staff meetings. Please don't do this. Whoever's doing this, call me. I want to tell you it's terrible. No one enjoys them. And even in the time of COVID, it's even more important because we're all really emotionally exhausted because communicating virtually takes more toll on us. We have to be much more intentional. We have to sit in an uncomfortable chair. We're missing everybody's social cues, which throws us off. So make things shorter in general. But what are scripts? Scripts are mindful planning, proactive leadership, ways of speaking and being to our employees. It can be a difficult conversation that you have to talk to somebody. Maybe you have to fire somebody. You're going to write out a script for it. You're going to have calm, respectful language. You're going to have encouraging language, and you're going to still fire somebody. And it's going to feel better for you. You're going to say what you need to say legally, and you're going to be kind about it. And you're going to have something ready so that you don't go in there and say something angry or say something that doesn't help the situation. It doesn't help your mental health. I've developed a couple scripts for 2 important ways that you can connect with employees. Now, if you want to be a proactive leader, you want to be individually checking in with your employees, and you want to do group check-ins, and you want to have specific goals around this. It's not just to shoot the breeze. You really are mindful and intentional planning because you're a proactive leader, right? So what are some of the goals for an individual check-in? Number 1, relationship. Remember, we talked about hope last week, and I said to you that the number 1 factor of any kind of outcome in the therapeutic relationship is not how smart I am or how many letters I have behind my name. It is not the type of therapy I use or the intervention used. It is my ability as a human being to connect and impart hope. That means I have to build relationship. Relationship is important. You want to let people know you care about them. You want to be professional, but you want to say, hey, how are you? How are things? You're going to assess impact. In COVID times, how is COVID impacting them? Has that changed your situation from pretty crisis to really crisis? And then you want to think about their immediate needs. I'm just thinking and checking in with you, but I want to have a handle on your ability to get to work, transportation, your childcare. I want to know if your housing is stable, and I want to have a heads up on this so I can offer you some resources, or we can get together and problem solve so I can keep you employed. I also want to look at other potential challenges to working. Is there anything that I don't know about that I can actually help make better as an employee or as a manager or a leader? And then you want to move in quickly to problem solving if appropriate at that time. These individual check-ins are generally once a week, generally 15 minutes. This is something you want to pull them in for a private place and say, hey, I'm just checking in. It's my weekly check-in. I missed you. How are you? I noticed you did this, right? So what do you say? Here's a sample script. Again, you want to spend some time writing. You can take this script and modify it to your language and your agency, but it hits all of our goals. That's one of the things the script does. So I'm going to read it out loud. I just want to check in with you and see how you're doing. What are some of the biggest challenges you've got right now? What's going on with you? And if they share with you a few things, you want to turn it back on them. Wow, that sounds like a lot. What's your current plan to deal with these challenges? How are you doing this? Is there any way I can support you? Is there anything that you can think of we can do here that would help us reach our goals as a business? Do you think that we're doing things correctly? Are we responding right? Get some input, get the buy-in. And it's a great place to affirm people. Hey, I noticed you handled that customer the other day really well. I liked how you went out of your way to be kind. I liked how calm you were, even though I know that must have been frustrating. And then I really appreciate you hanging in here and being part of a team with everything else you're dealing with. Let me know if I can help. Simple, to the point, hits all of our goals. I know I'm going quickly because of time. Moving on to group check-ins. Again, you want to have realistic goals about your group check-in. If it is so you can hear your own voice reading out your boring board report, that's a terrible goal. I'm just going to tell you straight up. That is a terrible goal. Most of the time, group meetings should be meant to foster a sense of team, to quickly and amazingly focus on things that are going right. I think we do not do that as often as we need to. If we have to do a problem solving group, let's break out of that, do a special time for that with key people, and do that later. You want to involve them in creative problem solving. Hey guys, I'm noticing that I don't have enough help on this shift. Or hey, I'm noticing that the trash keeps getting piled up. Just little things. Make it quick, give 5 minutes for them to give you ideas and then say, thanks, I'm going to take those under consideration. I might reach out to you individually to talk more about this idea. Don't let this group go too long. This should be a short meeting. This should lift people up, and you should leave this meeting feeling re-energized, reminded of certain key things, and a team, right? You want to ensure them that their input's valuable, and you want to always comment on the good. Never miss an opportunity to tell people how great they're doing. I just want to say that, and I want to say that again, never miss an opportunity to tell people how great they're doing. I cannot tell you guys that in the middle class, I hear it so often. My kids will say, I love you. My husband will say, you're doing such a great job. People who are really struggling through a crisis, they don't have time and space and energy to sit around telling people how great they are, unfortunately. And it can be an amazing game changer for them to say, I see you, I notice you, and you're doing an amazing job. So don't miss that opportunity, okay? And I think you also might want to reconvene in this group and remind people about the systems that you're setting up. Hey, we're communicating via Facebook. Hey, look for here. Again, using those techniques we talked about last week. Group check-in is a great way to do it. Here's a script for group check-in. Hey, I want you all to know how much I appreciate your hard work. And again, you want to use your own language. You want to be sincere. You know, I've noticed people pitching in, trading shifts, cleaning up, helping without being asked. It means so much to me to have an amazing team. Together we have, and then tell them what you've accomplished. We've served, handled, sold, whatever your service goals are. Involve them in that. Let them have the frame of mind that we're in this together, right? We have some other challenges we need to tackle, and I'm wanting to get some feedback from you guys. We're facing, maybe it's revenue losses, staff shortage, tough decisions about whether we're able to keep the doors open. You want to let them know and remind them that it's hard being a business owner sometimes. You don't want to put it on them, but they can relate to this. They can relate to managing something difficult. They absolutely 100% can. Does anybody have any ideas about how we can get through these current challenges? I'd like to spend 10 minutes getting some ideas. Write them down, 10 minutes, have a cutoff, write everything down. Even if it sounds absolutely nuts, validate their participation, write it down. Then wrap it up after 10 minutes. You know, I appreciate all these suggestions. I plan on considering these along with other factors that I have to deal with that I can't control. I want to let you know and how you're going to communicate that information. Remember, consistency, calm, safety signals. If I say I'm going to do something, I am going to do it. And I'm going to do it in a very specific way. That's trauma-informed practices. If anyone has any questions, reach out to me again by your and proactively set up communication channels. So I kind of flew through that. I'm going to invite you guys now in the chat to, and we did this last time with varied success. We'll try again. Please, if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them in the chat. While I'm waiting for the chat to populate, I want to remind you guys that this is our slide here that has Tifanie and I's contact information. If you think of something after this, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you. Next week's presentation I'm very excited about. The topic is resource navigation. This is actually one of the huge research-based interventions that companies across the country are using to increase outcomes with their high crisis employees. And although we will delve into this in detail at our larger workshop, we're going to be lucky enough to have Lori Larson from one of our partner agencies, the Career Learning Center of the Black Hills. For those of you who are not familiar with the Career Learning Center, this is an amazing place where people go to get their GEDs. There's also certifications for EMTs and different things like that. So you have a group of adult ed learners who often lead high crisis lives. And a couple of years ago, the Career Learning Center partnered with me to become a trauma-informed agency. So for the last several years, I have been providing training and mentorship to make them trauma-informed. Now, what does that mean? It means that through a certain level of mindset shift, that we're going to create an environment that sends tons of safety signals and keeps in mind crisis brains when we're teaching, when we're mentoring. We trained everybody in this agency, from the tech people who never see clients are trauma informed. Our secretaries, who are also often the first place that people come, need to have that calm attitude, that amazing welcoming attitude, and they do. And this place is absolutely killing it. Lori is going to come next week. They're going to talk about how utilizing these practices over time have really increased their student achievement outcomes. They have won national awards for this. It's fantastic. So next week, that will be December 16th at 11 a.m. Lori will be joining us. Now, there was one thing. She has had knee surgery recently. She may not feel up to it, and rest assured, if she doesn't, I will put embarrassing photos of her and I will tell their story and give her the information. But we're really hoping that Lori can join us. Again, Tifanie next week will continue with the impact of ACEs and why it's so important to build resiliency in our communities and what it means. And I will be highlighting cost savings and research-based practices and the case for creative incentives that we're going to highlight as well. And then again, the resource navigation, which is really fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and try to read the chat. It looks like we have some. Tifanie, go ahead too. Are you able to see it? Okay. Okay. Is there any, I guess there isn't any questions. I just saw the comments, but if you have questions, please put them in now. We'll wait just a few minutes. Tifanie, do you have any other comments or ending things that you'd like to say as we wrap up today?
No, I think that that's great. And again, just can't stress this enough. This isn't even scratching the surface. And if you're like me, it took me probably, a few months to really the brain does what. Although I having done social work for a while, I wish that I would have had this as like a baby social worker, because I think that it would have really helped me connect the dots and understand how I could have done better at connecting and engaging and empowering. And so the fact that I have it now is good, but I do wish I would have had it when I was first starting out. So so just continue to come back, reach out to us. We are a resource, you're part of the family now. So, and we're really excited and hope to see some of you in the spring when we can dive deeper and really unpack what this looks like for you individually, in your workplace or just your own experience, because I always get reminded and end up being reflective when I'm here Tracy talk and, oh, that's probably why, and oh, that's good. So I always like to come listen to Tracy for my own benefit.
Same, Tiff. I really like listening to you too. So I don't see any other. Oh,
we did have one. We had a question. And completely understand, what are we going to do as leaders, Tracy, when I'm overwhelmed? I don't know about you, but I mean, and my staff is pretty small. How can we be mindful to put these things into place while kind of managing our own self-care, but also trying to, because we really want to do the best for our employees. How do we find that balance?
Mm-hmm. I just read a quote today, Scott, that I just really resonated with me. I almost put it in the presentation last minute. And it said something about, as a leader, you're going to either focus all of your energy and stress on reacting. And if you do that, you're going to have to spend the rest of your energy on repairing. And so to me, I think I personally want to tell you that, as a small business owner myself, having led teams myself, and now we have COVID, and we have all of these other things going on. I'm homeschooling. Nobody wants me teaching children. I don't know I have many other gifts and talents. I mean, I just want to validate that feeling, but I want to say this: proactive responses, spending the time pre-planning, spending the time taking one thing at a time. If you want to tackle attendance and just look at that and use some of our practices and say, what can I do here that will help this, will save you so much time in reacting. And it's the reacting that wears us down. It is the reacting to all these stressful situations and not having a plan and not having a place that actually mentally wears us down and emotionally wears us down. So I would just say, start small. If you're looking at starting small, look at your attendance policies, have us come in and do a quick coaching meeting with you. And I would also encourage you as a leader to do this. You have to spend time doing things that rejuvenate you and that fill you with happiness, even if you don't feel like you have time. That's when you need it the most. You need to sit down and schedule this with yourself. You need to start understanding that if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I have to take care and repair myself. It's the secret is doing things that are stress relieving to us and putting those in our schedule and starting to heal as well. So hopefully that was a little bit. Tiffany, what are your thoughts on that?
I can never find my mute button. No, I absolutely agree. Just really processing through, like, it's okay to, I think selfish gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's okay to be self-focused and really doing what you can. I always just remind myself, if I've showed up with what I have, where I'm at, just starting small, then I'm okay with that. It doesn't have to be all in one. And I think when you think about these tools and you just break it down, and we talk about feedback loops, and we don't talk about that in this series, but we would in the bigger sessions. Starting small, just being consistent, just showing up, offering kindness and grace and good intent and all of those magic words, you can create a lot of positive change just by starting small with those feedback loops. So I just try to remind myself to just take one interaction at a time. Also holding space for myself that I'm human, I'm doing the best that I can. So I just give myself the same grace that I would give my team as well.
That's a great point. And I just thought of something too, Scott. Maybe you just can commit to one thing, is starting to build in a 5-minute individual employee check-in with your team every week. Maybe that's the very small step. Maybe you get the script. You just say, I'm going to check it off my list. And I invite you to see if relationships improve, if communication improves, if you start to notice patterns and you can act a little bit better. And maybe that would lower your stress, to just start with the individual check-in. And it doesn't have to be 10 or 15 minutes to begin with. Just, how are you? How are things going? Thanks for being here. See if there's anything you can anticipate and start with that small goal. So. Any other questions, everybody?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Tiffany, thank you again for partnering. And thank you to Elevate. Please join us next week for our resource navigation. And I probably should have explained a little bit. Resource navigation is the idea of having an on-site or close to, or somebody that visits your agency or business occasionally, or a partnership with somebody who helps high crisis employees navigate the biggest detractors from work performance, which are generally transportation, childcare, housing, and other crisis related issues. So please join us next week, December 16th at 11 a.m. and the sign up is in the chat. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you next week.